Hey, Matrix Live, Ben here, and we are talking today to Will and Noah. Hey, you guys, how's it going? So you guys have been working on the spec. Why don't you introduce yourselves and talk about that?
Hey everyone, I'm Noah. I'm typically a Synapse backend engineer, but I took on the task of deploying the new spec, which Will had a huge hand in helping write. Will?
Yeah, I'm Will Bamberg. I'm a technical writer, and I worked at Element. I started in October, and my main project while I was there was working on the Spec platform, and sort of trying to well, I guess you could say modernize it, giving it a new back end really, and a new front end as well.
Yeah. So Will, you were only with us for quite a short time, but it was short and sweet because you managed to deliver a whole new spec platform.
Yeah, well, I mean, and I'm super grateful actually to Andrew for getting this thing over the line. I think it would have been nice if I'd shipped it while I was still here, but it just didn't quite work out. I think the last part of shipping something is always takes longer than you think it's going to, right?
Yeah.
And I'm super glad that Andrew put the work into that.
Yeah,
I'm super excited to see it out.
So, all right, let's go back to way simpler. What is a spec? What is a specification? Why would I want a spec?
So, Matrix fundamentally is a spec. A spec or a specification, typically an API specification, application programming interface, if you don't know, is a definition for how different processes should talk to each other. So we have several specs in the Matrix ecosystem. For instance, we have client server, server to server, and these say this is how clients talk to servers, and this is how servers talk to other servers. And the benefit of this is that you can go ahead and write whatever client you like with all the lovely front end and features you have, and as long as it speaks the same language as the server, your client can come and interact with the Matrix ecosystem. So it's very important for the diversity of this ecosystem to be able to have a spec that is easy for developers to understand and essentially allows for all of these different systems to work together. So roughly the Matrix spec is something that we as the Matrix Foundation provide to everyone to create their implementations.
Right. So by its very nature, it needs to be public, it needs to be readable. And yeah, everybody needs to be able to see it. Okay, so what was the old way? What have you done? What have you actually replaced? What was the old thing?
So, gosh, the old spec. I'll talk a little bit about it, and then I'll let Will talk about this because. So essentially, the old spec was a bit of a hodgepodge of a lot of legacy build systems that we sort of started with standards and then built some of our own tooling around it. We started with Sphinx and RST, which is restructured text, which is a good way of writing documentation, but has fallen a little bit out of favor in developers' eyes in recent years. And not only did we use that tooling, but we used our own scripts to validate what we had written, mostly for the CI when people make contributions, because this is a public document. We have lots of different scripts that would run, and it would make sure that everything fit together properly. So this was all written in different languages. There was Python, there was Node.js, there was a lot of Bash. It was all a bit messy, and the first step was really that Will took was understanding what we had and how we could somehow take that to more modern tooling and using things like Markdown for contributions.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So contributions is something I want to come back to because I want to know how this is going to help with contributions. So what's the approach to this? Is it better to look at the tooling and then try to figure out how to modernize it, or is it better to just disregard the tooling, get the output into something that works, and then go backwards from there? What's the real approach when you look at a project like this?
Well, I mean, for me, I guess I mostly went with the latter approach to this. I mean, I think that one of the things that struck me when I looked at it is kind of what Andrew says. The Spec platform was kind of complicated and homegrown, and especially I think things like the sort of tool chain for like how you get from writing docs and then building something, and then that something going somewhere else, and then having extra like CSS injected into it, and then being deployed in some other thing. was like that was hard to understand. That tool chain was kind of tortuous, I think, and that made it difficult to change things. Yeah. Really, I mean, like there were things I wanted us to do for users of the spec, which I couldn't really see a way to doing in the context of the existing platform. So it seemed like let's have a look at, let's just see what it looks like with something new, and see if this is a thing we can just migrate kind of clean into a new platform. So that was, I guess, the approach I took to it.
Yeah. Okay.
I think. Yeah. I mean, apart from, so there's kind of back end stuff like the implementation of it. And the other thing is that really struck me about the spec in terms of the things we could do better was the navigation. So the matrix spec is big, especially the client server spec it's a big document. And really the only nav you got for it was a table of contents, which was like 20 screens long, just to scroll the table of contents. And it's very easy to get lost in it. And once you click a heading in the table of contents, you're like somewhere in this like very big page, and it's like to get a picture of where I am and to get a kind of like a sense of an overview of what the kind of landscape of this document is telling me was hard. It's like being adrift in a sea, and it's just this like sea all around you. So I thought that like nav was important. Having better nav within the document was important, most important. And then there's also nav between the different spec documents I thought was lacking. So at the moment, if you're in the client server spec and you want to look at the appendices or the server spec or the overview spec, it's not clear how you get back or how you get across to the other one. So I wanted us to just kind of focus on those two aspects of it, and yeah. So those are the main things I was most concerned with. There are like little bits and pieces as well, like we talked before about, just things like colors and contrast and that kind of stuff, which was obviously an issue in the existing spec. But the main big pieces were the nav, I think. So these seem like difficult things to do in the existing tool chain, right? I didn't understand how I could do it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, without attacking the existing tool chain too much, how come it was chosen like this? Then did it evolve from simpler origins like sprawling projects tend to, or was there a good reason for that choice at the time?
About the original toolchain, I'm not sure, because I mean a lot of that was built right at the beginning of Matrix, and I joined a little bit after that. But I imagine with other projects you essentially start with one technology, which was Sphinx, and then we wanted to go ahead and implement other technologies that would be useful for a variety of use cases, specifically Swagger, which allowed us to print out the schema of your requests and your responses. And it would also allow us to use the Swagger UI tool, which means someone can go in and kind of see all the different requests that they can make, just fill in some boxes and then hit do request. And it would be like a REST client for Matrix for you, which was awesome. But that added existing complexity, and not just to the tool chain, but also to the continuous integration pipeline. And I think it just continued on from there.
All right. So the new thing, what is the technology stack of the new version? Well,
the new spec is based on Hugo, which is a static site generator. So when I looked at this, I thought, well, looking at the old platform, I basically thought this is a static site generator. It's one we've implemented ourselves. That's really what it's doing. And so I thought, let's see if there are existing SSGs we can use, which I guess a lot of these things didn't exist probably when this spec was put together. I mean, Sphinx, I guess, is one of the first really like SSGs in that kind of vein. And now there's a bunch more of these things around. So I said, let's take a look at, existing SSGs that seem like they're well enough supported that they'll be around in a few years' time still. And so I chose Hugo for this for some reason. Well, I think all SSGs have got good things and bad things about them. What I like about Hugo is that it's fast, and also I like that it's a single binary install.
Right.
I'm not. I think if you're really bought into the kind of React Node NPM world, there are better choices than Hugo. But I think if you're a little uncomfortable with that, then I think Hugo is a nice way to go, because you basically only have to trust one person, which is the person who maintains Hugo,
right.
and then you get just about everything.
Yeah. Okay.
So the basis of it is Hugo. Hugo supports themes, and we had a look at different themes that we could use, and it uses Doxy, which is a theme developed by some people at Google.
Right.
And it's again like looking for things that have got enough traction that they'll probably be around for a while and they'll probably be maintained properly. And Doxy seemed like it had some quite nice features, some which we ended up not using actually, but
I mean, they're available for the future if we need them.
Yeah, right. And and it seems like it's a pretty well maintained thing. And it uses Doxy in turn uses Bootstrap, which again is pretty well understood and well used technology. So so that's the foundation, Hugo and Doxy.
Right. And Hugo itself ingests Markdown.
Hugo ingests Markdown. You can make Hugo work with RST, but it doesn't really want to.
Right.
And it also makes it a whole lot slower because you have to kind of call out to some other process to do the actual RST conversion.
Oh, it doesn't pandoc to Markdown in the background, does it? That would be fun.
It does. I can't. It might do. It does something. But it makes the whole thing a bunch slower, and it kind of wants Markdown.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So on that front, then, how did you generate the required Markdown for those pages? Did you generate it from the RSTs? Because I know that those RSTs were a bit of a jumble themselves. Or did you wait for the HTML and then go backwards from there?
I used Pandoc to convert the RSTs into Markdown, and then I went basically manually fixed all the things that didn't work anymore.
I think you'd have had to do quite a bit of manual fixing.
Okay. Yeah, it was okay. It was. Well, maybe I've just blotted that part out. I don't know.
That sounds like it's like you're being the robot. You're being the regex,
kind of
human regex to go through it. All right. So the new thing is better in a few ways, not least the fact that it's actually maintainable by humans now. But one of the other benefits, I wondered about accessibility, because you made a couple of references there to things like fixing the fonts, fixing some of the colors, maybe the headers and that kind of stuff. I don't know if you want to comment on the accessibility gains, or is that too specific?
I mean, I can say that it's difficult. It's difficult for me to make specific technical claims about accessibility because it's not a thing which was a specific goal of the project, right? Like in terms of getting, particular like WCAG ratings for it. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't want to make those kinds of claims. I think in general terms, using more standard technology means accessibility is easier to achieve. So I think, for instance, using Bootstrap, it means that it's that there are more, it's easier to make it accessible. Yep. I think very broadly interpreted, I think Markdown is easier for people to write than RST, and that makes it accessible in that sense. I think there were obviously problems with just things like contrast in the old spec, which I think should be more or less fixed, or at least better in the new spec. One thing I should say, actually, which is one important thing that happened when we were working on the spec, is that Dean did a UI review and a whole bunch of updates for that, mm-hmm. and it dramatically improved it from my initial effort. So in the kind of course of work on it, I got like a basic Hugo install working with the docs and some fairly light changes to the default Doxy theme. And Dean did a review of it and came back with like these Figma mockups, and it's like, so much better. So I think it will be good to acknowledge his contribution to that.
So Dean Hansen is our designer, designer here. Yeah, he's also the famed designer. His probably most famous work is the FOSDEM 2021 T-shirt, which was for Matrix, that is. Anyway, unrelated. And then finally, then it's much easier for people to contribute because it is just Markdown instead of a labyrinthine bunch of RSTs. We should be able to expect that people have an easier time onboarding themselves. And how does that relate to the proposal to integrate into the spec flow? Maybe that's one for Andrew.
So typically, I mean, it doesn't change things too much. We're still kind of using Swagger under the hood. You don't have to write RST, which is great because the rest of our code bases typically use Markdown. But when you're writing a proposal, that you go through the proposal process, that is just a Markdown document that you do. When it comes time to write a spec PR, I think that will generally be the same, except the file hierarchy is a lot more sane these days, thanks to Will. Okay. It's also worth noting that a lot of the time we will write the spec PR for you. So that probably doesn't change too much. I think the main thing is that it's easier now to dive into the spec and see what the current state of the world is, which is, you have to do quite a lot when you're writing a proposal.
Absolutely. All right. And then the final thing that I've got in my notes is unfreezing. So the spec's always progressing, but it definitely, there's a certain sine wave of rate of progress. And Andrew, you seem to think that this new spec is going to help unfreeze that.
Sort of. So basically what unfreezing means is we froze the contents of the spec while they were being transformed, while they were going from RST to Markdown, and all the validation tools were getting moved around and made much better. So you could make new proposals, and we could merge those proposals, and that's continued to happen with the work from the spec core team. But you couldn't make any spec PRs that actually changed the text of the spec. Because it was being changed at the moment in the background with the new spec platform. So what we want to do is be able to allow that again. That means completing the deployment of the new spec. So we got the new spec platform up in its unstable form. So spec.matrix.org/unstable. That took a while because the pipeline was a bit crazy, but it's much better these days. Okay. And the other part is making it so that the old, if you visit the matrix.org/docs/spec website right now, you'll see the old spec still. We don't want to be updating that anymore, of course. So spec PRs really just need to target the new spec that Will has gone ahead and implemented. So we need to get all the old spec documents out of there so people writing spec PRs don't get confused. We don't want to show the old unstable spec website anymore that now redirects to the new spec website, so there's not two sources of truth and people get confused.
Oh, does that redirect?
It does now, as of a couple days ago.
Great.
So yeah, essentially there's a lot of process in our infrastructure to unfreeze the spec, but we'll let you know when it happens, and we'll write a blog post probably, and then spec PRs will land again.
Awesome. Chaps, I mean, this is actually a huge improvement. It's something that's been requested on and off for ages. And yeah, we finally actually got some capacity to work on it. So thank you for being involved in that. Were there any last things you wanted to add?
I just want to thank Will for doing all the work and getting it done.
Yeah.
I mean, it's such an improvement, and I don't think it would have happened otherwise. So thank you very much.
Cool. Yeah, thanks, Steve.
It was fun. I'm incredibly glad to see it live. It makes me, and it's super nice that people say things like that about it. So it's great.
Yeah, it's definitely going to help. All right, thank you both, and thank you, Matrix Live. Bye.